I took the job because no one else wanted it, which should have been my first warning. The listing was vague in a way that felt intentional, like it was trying to filter people out without saying so directly. Night shift technician needed for remote data facility. Minimal experience required. High discretion mandatory. The pay was more than anything I'd ever made, especially for something that didn't even require a degree. That alone should have made me suspicious. But I wasn't in a position to question easy money. I had just lost my apartment. My savings were nearly gone, and I was down to choosing between bad options. This one just happened to be the quietest. The facility sat about 40 miles outside the city, far enough that you lost cell service halfway there. The road leading up to it was narrow and poorly maintained, like it hadn't seen regular traffic in years. When I finally reached the gates, I expected something more official, I guess. Armed guards, checkpoints, something that would justify the kind of secrecy hinted at in the job description. Instead, there was just a single security booth and a man who barely looked up from his monitor when I gave him my name. He handed me a badge, a ring of keys, and a folded sheet of paper. "Rules," he said, like it was the most normal thing in the world. "You'll want to read those before your shift starts." I asked him if there was any kind of training. He shook his head. "If you made it here, you're qualified enough." That should have been my second warning. The building itself was massive, a low concrete structure stretching wider than it was tall. No windows, no markings, just a dull gray slab sitting in the middle of nowhere, humming faintly like it was alive. When the outer doors slid open, the first thing that hit me was the temperature. It was freezing inside, the kind of cold that seeps into your bones and stays there. The second thing was the noise. Rows and rows of server racks filled the interior, each one blinking with tiny lights, each one contributing to a constant, overwhelming hum. It wasn't loud, in the traditional sense, but it was everywhere, pressing against your ears until you couldn't tell where it started or ended. It felt less like sound and more like pressure. A woman met me just inside the entrance. She looked exhausted in a way that went beyond a bad day, like she hadn't slept properly in weeks. "You're the new night tech?" she asked. I nodded. She gave me a look I couldn't quite place. Not pity, not concern. Something closer to resignation. "Stick to the rules," she said, tapping the folded paper in my hand. "And don't try to be curious." Before I could ask what that meant, she walked past me, heading for the exit. She didn't look back. I was alone after that. I found a small office near the center of the facility, just a desk, a chair, and a bank of monitors showing different sections of the building. That's where I finally unfolded the paper. There were only 8 rules. They were written in plain, simple language, like whoever made them didn't want any room for interpretation. Rule 1. Do not remove your ear protection while on the floor. Rule 2. If the humming stops, leave immediately and do not look behind you. Rule 3. Ignore any voices you hear over the intercom between 2 a.m. and 3 a.m. Rule 4. If you see a server rack with no indicator lights, report it and do not approach. Rule 5. Do not access server block C under any circumstances. Rule 6. If you notice someone else in the facility, verify their badge before engaging. If they do not have one, return to the office and lock the door. Rule 7. The cameras will occasionally display areas that do not exist. Do not attempt to locate them. Rule 8. If your name is called, do not respond. I read through the list twice, then a third time, waiting for it to make some kind of sense. It didn't. At first, I assumed it was some kind of joke. A hazing ritual maybe. Something to mess with new hires on their first night. But there was something about the way it was written that didn't feel like a joke. There was no humor in it, no exaggeration, just instructions. Clear, direct, final. I checked the time. 11:42 p.m. My shift officially started at midnight. For the next few minutes, I tried to focus on the normal parts of the job. The monitors showed temperature readings, system loads, network traffic. Everything looked stable, almost boring. If not for the rules sitting on the desk in front of me, I might have convinced myself that this was just another quiet overnight position. At 11:58, I put on the ear protection they'd left for me. Thick, industrial-grade headphones that dulled the constant hum to something more manageable. Not silent, just distant. At exactly midnight, one of the monitors flickered. Not a glitch, not static, just a brief, subtle shift, like the image had been replaced for a fraction of a second with something else. I leaned closer to the screen, trying to see if it would happen again. It didn't. I told myself it was nothing. Old equipment, faulty feed. There were a dozen reasonable explanations, and I clung to all of them because the alternative didn't make sense. Around 12:30, I did my first walk through the floor. Up close, the server racks felt different. The hum was stronger there, even through the ear protection, vibrating faintly through the metal frames and into the ground beneath my feet. The lights blinked in uneven patterns, like they were communicating something just beyond my ability to understand. I checked the labels, matched them to the system logs, made sure everything was where it was supposed to be. Routine, simple, normal. Then, I noticed one rack near the back. It looked like all the others at first glance. Same size, same structure. But the lights weren't blinking. They weren't off either. They were wrong. Instead of the usual steady indicators, there was a faint, pulsing glow coming from inside the unit, like something deeper within was breathing. I froze, the list of rules flashing through my mind. Rule 4. Report it. Do not approach. I took a step back, forcing myself to turn away, even though every instinct I had was telling me to look closer, to figure out what I was seeing. That was the moment I realized something important. The rules weren't there to confuse me. They were there to stop me from doing exactly what I wanted to do. And for the first time since I arrived, I started to feel like I wasn't alone in that building. I reported the rack the way the system instructed me to, logging its location and marking it for review. There was no confirmation message, no acknowledgement that anyone had seen it. The entry just sat there, like it had been written into something that didn't care whether it was read. I hovered over the keyboard for a moment, debating whether to add more detail, but the rules had been clear. Report it, nothing more. So I left it alone. That should have been the end of it. It wasn't. When I returned to the office, one of the monitors had changed. Not flickering this time, not a glitch. A full feed, steady and clear, showing a section of the facility I didn't recognize. The angle was wrong, the layout unfamiliar. The rows of racks were closer together, almost cramped, and the lighting had a dim yellow tint instead of the cold white I'd seen everywhere else. I checked the label at the bottom of the screen. There wasn't one. All the other feeds were clearly marked. Block A, Block B, cooling systems, main corridor. But this one was blank. Just a live image of a place that shouldn't have existed. Rule 7. The cameras will occasionally display areas that do not exist. Do not attempt to locate them. I stared at the screen longer than I should have. At first, nothing moved. It looked like any other part of the facility, just off. But the longer I watched, the more details started to feel wrong. The racks weren't aligned properly. The cables ran in patterns that didn't make sense. And the lights, there were too many of them, blinking in no recognizable rhythm. Then something shifted. Not on the racks, behind them. A shape passed between the rows, just for a second, partially obscured by metal and shadow. It wasn't clear enough to make out, but it was definitely there. Something moving where nothing should have been. I leaned closer without thinking, my hand reaching toward the monitor like I could somehow get a better look. The feed cut out instantly. replaced by the normal grid of labeled cameras, all showing exactly what they were supposed to show. Clean, ordered, real. I pulled my hand back slowly, my chest tightening. Do not attempt to locate them. I hadn't moved from the office. I hadn't done anything except look. But somehow, it felt like I'd already crossed the line. I forced myself to sit down, trying to focus on the routine again. System checks, temperature logs, anything that would keep my mind off what I'd just seen. For a while, it worked. The familiarity of numbers and predictable patterns helped steady me. Then, at exactly 2 a.m., the intercom clicked on. There was no warning, no static buildup, just a sharp, sudden activation that cut through the hum of the building, even with the ear protection on. A voice followed. Hello? It was soft, almost casual, like someone testing the system. I froze. Rule 3. Ignore any voices you hear over the intercom between 2 in the morning and 3 in the morning. The voice came again, a little clearer this time. Can anyone hear me? It sounded normal, not distorted, not threatening. Just a person somewhere in the building, trying to get someone's attention. For a moment, I considered responding. That was the problem. It didn't feel dangerous. It felt reasonable, like the kind of thing you were supposed to answer. Please, the voice said. I think I'm lost. My grip tightened on the armrest of the chair. Lost? That didn't make sense. There were no visitors here, no other staff scheduled for the night shift, at least none that I'd been told about. And if someone was lost, why would the rules explicitly tell me to ignore them? The intercom crackled again. I can see the racks, but they don't look right. They keep changing. My eyes flicked to the monitors before I could stop myself. Everything looked normal. Every feed stable. Every corridor empty. You're in the office, right? The voice continued. I saw you earlier. That sent a sharp jolt through me. I hadn't seen anyone. No one had approached me. No one had shown up on the cameras. The facility had been empty since the moment the day shift left. You reported the rack, the voice said. The one in the back. I stood up so quickly the chair rolled into the desk behind me. That wasn't possible. No one should have known about that except me, and whatever system logged it. Don't trust the rules, the voice said, dropping lower now, more urgent. They're not there to protect you. They're there to keep it contained. I took a step back from the desk, my heart pounding. Contained. The word echoed in my head, connecting itself to everything I'd seen so far. The rack, the camera feed, the hum that never seemed to stop. Listen to me, the voice said. If the humming stops... The intercom cut out mid-sentence. Silence rushed in to fill the space, thick and heavy. For a few seconds, I just stood there, waiting for it to come back. It didn't. I checked the time. 2:17 a.m., still within the window. I sat back down slowly, my mind racing. The rules said to ignore the voices, but the voice knew things it shouldn't have known. That left me with two possibilities. Either the rules were lying, or whatever was speaking to me wasn't human. I didn't like either option. At 2:43 a.m., the intercom clicked on again. This time, there was no greeting, no hesitation, just my name. Clear, precise, spoken in a tone that felt far too familiar. I didn't respond. I didn't move. I barely even breathed. Say something, the voice said, perfectly calm. I know you can hear me. It sounded like me. Not similar. Not close. Exact. Same cadence, same inflection. Every tiny detail replicated perfectly. A cold weight settled in my stomach. Rule 8. If your name is called, do not respond. I understood that one now. The voice said my name again, a little louder this time. Then it laughed. Not dramatically. Just a quiet, satisfied sound, like it had confirmed something. The intercom went dead after that. When I checked the time again, it was 3:01 a.m. And for the first time since my shift started, The hum of the building faltered. It didn't stop completely, but it dipped. Just for a second. Just long enough for me to notice. The change was subtle enough that I might have missed it if I hadn't been listening for it. The hum dipped, like the building had taken a shallow breath and forgotten how to exhale. The pressure in my ears shifted, the vibration under my feet softening just enough to feel wrong. Then it returned to normal, steady and constant, as if nothing had happened. I didn't move. Rule 2 replayed in my head, louder than anything I had heard all night. If the humming stops, leave immediately and do not look behind you. It hadn't fully stopped, but it had come close. Too close. I stayed in the chair for a while after that, staring at the monitors, waiting for something else to change. Nothing did. The feeds were stable. The system logs showed no anomalies. If I had been looking at the data alone, I would have said everything was fine. But I had felt it, and now I couldn't unfeel it. At 3:12 a.m., I decided to do another walk. Not because I wanted to, because I needed to confirm that everything was still where it was supposed to be. The floor felt colder than before. Not dramatically, but enough that I noticed it through my shoes. The air had that same sterile chill, but there was something underneath it now, something faint and metallic, like the aftertaste of a battery on your tongue. I moved slowly between the rows, checking the racks, matching them to the layout in my head. Everything looked the same, until I reached the back again. The rack I had reported was gone. Not powered down, not removed cleanly, just not there. In its place was an empty gap, perfectly aligned with the rest of the row, as if nothing had ever occupied that space. The surrounding racks hadn't shifted. The floor markings were intact. There was no sign that anything had been moved. It was like the rack had never existed. I stepped closer before I could stop myself, staring at the empty space, trying to reconcile what I was seeing with what I knew I had seen earlier. Rule 4. Do not approach. I was already too close. The moment I realized that, something deep in the facility clicked. Not near me, farther in. A heavy mechanical sound, like a door unlocking somewhere it shouldn't. I froze. The hum didn't change this time. But something else did. The lights. Not all of them, just a few rows ahead. They flickered once, twice, then stabilized. Except they weren't the same color anymore. They had shifted from cold white to that same dim yellow tint I had seen on the monitor earlier. My chest tightened. That place wasn't supposed to exist, and yet part of it was now right in front of me. I took a step back, then another. Every instinct I had was telling me to return to the office, lock the door, and wait for my shift to end. So that's what I tried to do. I turned around carefully, keeping my movements slow, controlled, and that's when I saw it. At the end of the row, just before the main corridor, there was someone standing there. They hadn't been there before. I was sure of that. They were facing away from me, standing perfectly still, their posture rigid in a way that didn't look natural. They were wearing dark clothing, something like a uniform, but I couldn't see a badge from this angle. Rule 6. If you notice someone else in the facility, verify their badge before engaging. I didn't speak. Not yet. I took a cautious step forward, trying to get a better look. The figure didn't react. "Hey," I said, my voice sounding smaller than I expected in the vast space. No response. Another step. "Can you turn around?" Slowly, almost reluctantly, they did. And for a second, I thought I was looking into a mirror. Same height, same build, same face. Mine. But not quite. The details were off in ways that were hard to pinpoint at first. The eyes were a little too wide, the smile just a fraction too slow to form. The skin had that same faint yellow tint as the lights around it, like it didn't belong under normal illumination. It was wearing a badge, my badge, clipped to its chest, exactly where mine should have been. I reached up instinctively, my fingers brushing against the one hanging from my neck. Still there. The thing in front of me tilted its head, studying me with an expression that felt more curious than hostile. Verification, it said, its voice matching mine perfectly, down to the smallest inflection. Rule 6 didn't account for this. How did you? I started, then stopped myself. Talking felt like a mistake. Everything about this felt like a mistake. The thing smiled wider. You reported the rack, it said. That was helpful. My stomach dropped. It took a step toward me. I stepped back immediately, putting more distance between us. It mirrored me, not in movement, but in timing, like it was learning the rhythm of my reactions. You shouldn't have done that, it continued. It noticed. What noticed? I asked before I could stop myself. The question slipped out, driven by something stronger than caution. The thing's smile faltered for the first time. Not disappearing, just adjusting. Like it hadn't expected me to ask that. The system, it said after a moment. The one you think you're maintaining. A low vibration passed through the floor, stronger than the hum, more focused. Closer. I felt it in my chest this time. The thing's eyes shifted slightly, looking past me, deeper into the rows behind. Then, back to me. You should go, it said. The tone had changed, less curious, more urgent. For once, it added, the rules are right. That was enough for me. I turned and walked. Not ran, not yet. I forced myself to keep a steady pace, even as every part of me screamed to move faster. I didn't look back. I didn't speak again. I just followed the path I had taken a dozen times already, back toward the office. The hum stayed constant. The lights stayed white. By the time I reached the door, it almost felt normal again. Almost. I stepped inside, shut the door behind me, and locked it. Only then did I let myself breathe. My hands were shaking. My reflection in the dark monitor screen didn't look right anymore. Not because it had changed, because I couldn't stop thinking about the version of me that had. And somewhere, deep in the building, something shifted again. This time, it didn't sound mechanical. It sounded like movement. I stayed in the office longer than I should have, trying to convince myself that what I'd seen out there could be explained. Fatigue, maybe. Stress. The kind of tricks your brain plays on you when you're alone in a place that never really feels quiet. But the more I tried to rationalize it, the less convincing it sounded. Hallucinations don't wear your badge. They don't know what you've reported. They don't warn you to leave. And they definitely don't feel like they're trying to help. I checked the monitors again, half expecting to see it standing somewhere on the feeds, watching me the way I had watched that impossible camera earlier. Every corridor was empty, every row of racks exactly where it should be. No sign of anyone else. But something had changed. The camera that had shown the non-existent area earlier was back. Same angle, same dim yellow lighting, same tight, unnatural spacing between the racks. Only this time, there was no mistaking what I was seeing. Something was standing in the middle of the frame. It wasn't shaped like a person. Not fully. It had the rough outline of one. Head, shoulders, limbs. But the proportions were wrong, stretched in places that didn't make sense. Its surface looked like a shifting pattern of light, rather than solid matter, as if it was made out of the same signals running through the servers around it. It wasn't moving. It didn't need to. Even standing still, it felt active, like a thought forming just behind your eyes. I forced myself to look away. Rule 7, do not attempt to locate them. I had already broken that rule once. I wasn't going to do it again. The clock on the wall read 3:47 a.m. A little over 2 hours left in my shift. All I had to do was stay in this room, follow the rules, and wait. That was it. Simple. At 4:02 a.m., the hum stopped. Not dipped, not faltered, stopped completely. The silence hit harder than the noise ever had. It wasn't just the absence of sound. It was the absence of something constant, something structural, like gravity suddenly switching off. My ears rang, my balance shifted, and for a split second, I felt weightless in a way that made my stomach drop. Rule 2. Leave immediately and do not look behind you. I didn't hesitate. I grabbed my keys, my badge, and headed for the door. The moment I unlocked it, the silence followed me out, stretching into the corridor like it had been waiting on the other side. The lights flickered once, then stabilized, but they weren't the same cold white anymore. They were all yellow now. Every row, every corridor, the entire facility had become the place from the camera. I started walking faster. Still not running, not yet. The path to the exit felt longer than before, the rows stretching out just a little farther than they should have, the turns coming just a second later than I expected. I kept my eyes forward, fixed on where I knew the main door should be. Something moved behind me. I heard it. Not footsteps, not mechanical. Something like fabric dragging across metal, accompanied by a faint, irregular clicking, like fingers tapping on glass, out of sync. I kept walking. "Wait," a voice said behind me. My voice. Perfect. Calm. Close. "Don't you want to understand what this is?" I didn't respond. I didn't slow down. The voice matched my pace, staying just behind me, just out of sight. "You think you're maintaining servers," it continued. "You think this is storage, processing, something simple." A pause, then softer. "It's not." I reached the final corridor before the exit. The doors were there, closed, the small control panel beside them glowing faintly. "Turn around," the voice said. "Just once." My hand hovered over the panel. "If you leave now," it added, "you won't remember this correctly." That made me hesitate. Just for a second, and that was enough. The sound behind me got closer. Not faster, closer, like distance itself had shifted. I clenched my jaw and pressed the panel. The doors didn't open. A red light blinked once. Locked. "That's new," the voice said, almost amused. I tried again. Nothing. The silence pressed in harder, heavier now, like it was filling the space where the hum used to be. "You reported the rack," it said. That created a gap. A faint reflection caught my eye in the metal surface of the door. Something standing behind me. Tall, wrong, not quite matching the proportions I remembered from the monitor. "You created a space where it could move." My hand tightened into a fist. "You can still fix it," the voice said. "Just look." I shut my eyes. Rule 2 didn't say anything about closing them. It said not to look behind me, so I didn't. "Look," it repeated, sharper now. The tone cracked slightly, something impatient slipping through the calm. I stayed still. Seconds passed, or minutes. It was hard to tell without the hum, without anything steady to measure against. Then the voice changed. No longer mine, no longer calm. It became something layered, multiple tones speaking at once, slightly out of sync. "You are not supposed to leave," it said. The words felt heavier, like they carried weight beyond sound. The panel under my hand flickered, green. The door slid open. Cold night air rushed in, sharp and real, and completely different from the artificial chill inside. I stepped forward immediately, crossing the threshold without thinking. The moment I was outside, the hum came back. Not from behind me, from everywhere, low, distant, like it had always been there and I had just been removed from it for a while. I didn't stop moving until I reached my car. I didn't look back, not once. When I finally did, after I was already inside, with the doors locked, the building looked exactly the same as it had when I arrived. Gray, silent, empty, no yellow light, no movement. Just a server farm in the middle of nowhere. My badge was still around my neck, my keys still in my hand, and in the reflection of the windshield, just for a second, I thought I saw something sitting in the passenger seat beside me. Same face, same expression, waiting. "I don't work there anymore." I never went back. They called me the next night, asked why I missed my shift. I told them I quit. They didn't argue. They didn't ask questions. They just said, understood, and hung up. But sometimes, late at night, when everything is quiet, I hear it again. That hum, faint, distant, like it's coming from somewhere it shouldn't be. And every once in a while, my phone lights up with a notification from a system I don't have access to anymore. A single line, unlabeled, untraceable, rack status, unresolved.